And I think everything is salvageable, and I think everything can be there's no lost person. I think change exists. I think all these things.
Why was Kelly Clarkson, one of America's wealthiest and most powerful stars, willing to throw it all away to start over from scratch? Behind the radiant smiles on the Kelly Clarkson Show lies an uncompromising battle, a fight to reclaim herself from the hands of the people she once called family. This isn't just the story of a messy divorce, it's the journey of a woman escaping a golden cage that kept her soul locked away for nearly a decade. The little girl no one wanted to take. To understand why Kelly Clarkson chose to bring the curtain down so drastically, we have to go back more than 30 years to a June afternoon in 1988 in the town of Burleson, Texas. The day her parents divorced, the three children in the house were separated in three different directions. Kelly's brother left with their father. Her sister left with their aunt. Neither of them looked back. 6-year-old Kelly Brianne Clarkson remained frozen in the doorway, holding a small suitcase as the cars vanished down the dirt road. That night, when her mother came into the room to tuck her in, Kelly asked why no one had chosen to take her. Jean did not answer immediately. Instead, she removed a small crescent moon ring from her pinky and placed it gently on her daughter's finger. She tried to comfort Kelly with the idea that even when people leave, the moon remains. Kelly kept that ring for years. She even wore it on the day she married Brandon Blackstock 25 years later. When Kelly was 12, a small moment changed the direction of her life. Cynthia Glenn, a music teacher, overheard her singing softly to herself in the high school hallway. Cynthia listened for several minutes before stopping her and encouraging her to join the choir. Cynthia kept Kelly's handwritten sheet music from high school. Nearly 3 decades later, in 2023, when Kelly learned that her former teacher was battling terminal cancer, she returned to Texas that same week. Inside the quiet hospital room, Cynthia held Kelly's hand and reminded her that she had always believed Kelly would make it. But before the fame arrived, Kelly lived through years that few people know about. She waited tables at a small diner. She tore tickets at a movie theater. She passed out flyers at trade shows just to scrape together a few dozen bucks a day. There were nights she slept in her car in Los Angeles because she couldn't make rent. The day Kelly went to cast for American Idol in 2002, she had exactly $8 in her wallet. She wore a pair of used shoes she'd bought at a thrift store for $3. That was everything she had to her name when she walked into that audition room. On September 4th, 2002, Kelly Clarkson made history as the very first winner of American Idol. Her single, A Moment Like This, broke the record for the biggest jump on the Billboard charts. The Texas girl with $8 in her pocket had become America's sweetheart overnight. But behind the scenes, Kelly stepped into the first major battle of her life. Her opponent was Clive Davis, the most powerful man in the recording industry at the time. Clive Davis didn't believe a girl from a reality TV show could write music. In 2004, during a meeting at the RCA offices, Kelly brought in the sheet music for a song she had written when she was 16. The song was called Because of You. Clive Davis picked up the music, looked it over, and tore it in half right in front of her. "This is garbage. Stop pretending to be a songwriter." Kelly didn't say a word. She bent down, picked up the torn scraps of paper, and took them back to her hotel room. That night, she taped the sheet music back together. 2 years later, Because of You sold over 10 million copies worldwide. It became the defining ballad for an entire generation of American women. In 2007, when Kelly decided to release My December, an album with a much darker, rock-heavy vibe, Clive Davis tried to stop her again. This time, he didn't tear up the music. He put a number on the table. $10 million. Just to scrap the album. She refused. She knew the promo budget would be slashed. She knew the sales would take a hit. But she chose her art. She chose her soul. The little girl who had been separated from her siblings had learned how to stand on her own 2 feet. But the biggest battle of her life wouldn't come from a music mogul. It would come from the man she called her husband. The room without a key. In 2012, Kelly met Brandon Blackstock. Brandon was a well-known manager in the country music scene, and Kelly was no stranger to him. Brandon was the stepson of Narvel Blackstock, the man who managed Kelly's career. Brandon was also the longtime manager of country star Blake Shelton. This inner circle was as tight as it gets. Friends, family, business. It was all woven together into a single net. Blake enthusiastically played matchmaker, urging Brandon to propose to Kelly. "A woman like Kelly, you only meet once in a lifetime," he'd say. Blake even promised to perform for 4 hours straight, for free if they tied the knot. But there was one person who wasn't thrilled about the relationship: Kelly's mother. Jean didn't attend the wedding in 2013. The day before the ceremony, she pulled her daughter aside and held her hands tightly. "Honey, never marry your boss. Never let a man hold both your heart and your wallet." Kelly was furious with her mother for 2 years over that comment. On October 20th, 2013, Kelly and Brandon were married on a quiet farm in Tennessee. Blake sang for 4 hours, just as he promised. Looking at the wedding photos, no one could have spotted a single red flag. After the wedding, Kelly made a decision she would eventually pay a heavy price for. She hired her husband as her personal manager. They both joined Starstruck Entertainment, the artist management empire run by her father-in-law, Narvel. In 2014, River Rose was born. 2 years later came Remington Alexander. Blake became the fun uncle to Kelly's kids, frequently visiting their Montana ranch for the holidays. On the outside, it was a picture-perfect family. On the inside, a net was tightening. In their Encino mansion, there was one room Kelly didn't have the key to: the accounting room. Only Brandon and her father-in-law were allowed inside. Every contract, every commission, every financial decision was handled behind that locked door. When Kelly wanted to buy decorations for her own home, she had to ask her husband for the money. Once, she wanted to buy a small piano for River Rose. She actually had to write an email asking Brandon for permission. 6 years later, Kelly's lawyers dug up that exact email, and it became one of the most crucial pieces of evidence in court. While Kelly focused on her music and her talk show, Brandon controlled all the commercial contracts. Her artistic goals were slowly hijacked by the family company's pursuit of profit. She was pushed into advertising campaigns she wanted no part of. Her schedule was booked so solid that she barely had time to write music. By the end of 2019, Kelly was burnt out. She was the primary breadwinner for an entire family empire, yet she didn't even know how much money was in her own bank account. That Christmas, Brandon claimed he had an urgent business trip. Kelly stayed behind at the Montana ranch, alone with her 2 children. At 2 a.m., after River Rose and Remington were fast asleep, she decorated the Christmas tree by herself. The next morning, she posted a picture of a happy family on Instagram, a photo taken the previous Christmas. Nobody knew she had spent the entire night crying. Years later, on a podcast in 2024, Kelly finally confessed, "That was the loneliest Christmas of my life. I was surrounded by everything, but I didn't truly own anything." Blake had seen the cracks forming for a long time, but he was friends with both of them. He couldn't intervene. All he could do was wait. Wait for the day Kelly would realize it for herself. And eventually, that day came. But it didn't come gently. It came like a storm. The red chairs, the divorce papers, and sleepless nights. In 2018, Kelly joined Season 14 of The Voice with one clear goal: to end Blake Shelton's winning streak. She achieved it in her very first season by coaching Bryn Cartelli to victory. Blake jokingly began calling her Queen Kelly on national television. But beneath the humor, there was real respect. He recognized something rare in her, a gift for reaching people on an emotional level in a way few artists could. Behind the playful banter of the red chairs, however, Kelly's private life was beginning to collapse. In June 2020, after 7 years of marriage, Kelly filed for divorce from Brandon Blackstock, citing irreconcilable differences. The news stunned the country. For Blake, the situation was painfully complicated. Brandon had been his longtime manager, while Kelly had become like a sister to him. But Blake eventually chose where he stood. During a meeting at an Oklahoma bar in August, he made it clear to Brandon that the damage done to Kelly had changed everything. In Blake's eyes, Brandon had hurt one of the strongest women he had ever known, and because of that, their friendship could not continue. He left a $50 bill for the beers and walked out of Brandon's life forever. In contrast to Blake's decisiveness, Kelly was forced to live a double life. The Kelly Clarkson Show had premiered right as the divorce broke, forcing her to show up every morning with a radiant smile, only to face mountains of legal paperwork every night. That pressure broke her at times. In July 2020, right on the set of The Voice, Kelly collapsed from exhaustion the moment the cameras cut. Blake, the only one who saw it happen, carried her to the green room and ordered the entire crew. Give her 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, Kelly walked back out, her smile perfectly intact, acting like nothing had happened. That year, she won a Daytime Emmy for Outstanding Entertainment Talk Show Host. But behind that trophy was a sacrifice no one knew about. Yet the wounds from the courtroom and the pressure on set still could not compare to the pain of facing her daughter. One evening in 2020, 6-year-old River Rose looked at Kelly with uncertainty in her eyes and wondered whether her father had left because she had somehow failed to be good enough. The question shattered Kelly. She held her daughter close and cried for an hour. After River finally fell asleep, Kelly sat down at the piano and wrote the song Magic. It became the only song in her career that she never changed, not even a single word. The legal battle grew even more grueling when Brandon demanded a massive alimony payout, leaving Kelly so drained she often couldn't muster the strength to go home after filming. The studio became her second home, where she would curl up on the floor using a coat for a pillow. A night shift janitor once caught her in that vulnerable moment. Instead of waking her, they quietly draped a warm blanket over her. It wasn't until 2023, after weathering the storm, that Kelly sent $10,000 as an anonymous thank you to the building's cleaning staff, the people who had protected her privacy during her loneliest nights. That quiet kindness was the fuel that kept Kelly standing through those agonizingly long days. And then, on the final night, when she put pen to paper to sign the divorce decree, she called only one person, uttering 4 fateful words. 4 words to Mom and the city that never sleeps. That night, after signing the divorce papers, Kelly called her mother and admitted that her mother had been right all along. The 20 minutes of silence on the line was the longest pause, but also the most crucial milestone marking Kelly's growth. She had finally learned to listen to her instincts and take back her agency from the people who had dictated her life. That self-determination started with a drawn-out legal battle. In 2022, Kelly countersued Brandon Blackstock for severe labor law violations. The 2023 ruling from the California Labor Commissioner didn't just order Brandon to pay back $2.6 million in illegal commissions. It was proof that Kelly had escaped the financial net she had been trapped in. The night after the ruling, Brandon sent a bitter text. "You won. Are you happy now?" Instead of replying, Kelly printed the text out and taped it to her fridge, not to hold a grudge, but as a reminder to herself. True freedom and standing on your own 2 feet is the ultimate victory, not the numbers in a bank account. But asserting her agency didn't stop at winning a lawsuit. It was also about a rebirth in a new environment. In 2023, she uprooted her entire career from Los Angeles to New York, turning the Kelly Clarkson Show at Studio 6A into a symbol of a fresh start. Blake Shelton called it one of the most spectacular rescues in Hollywood history. Behind that relocation was a promise she made to a late fan, a little girl from Brooklyn who had found hope in her music. Standing in front of the girl's mother at the funeral, Kelly had told herself, "If New York gave her daughter hope, then New York will give me freedom." In this new territory, Kelly continued to exercise agency over her own body. When she was diagnosed as pre-diabetic in early 2023, with a stark warning from her doctor: "If you don't change, you won't be around to see your kids graduate high school." Kelly didn't panic. She didn't seek out miracle cures or Ozempic, despite the rumors. Instead, she chose the harshest but most honest route: facing herself. She ditched all her old habits, walked dozens of miles in the Manhattan rain, and documented the process publicly on her show to remind young women about the power of discipline. That freedom also took shape in her album Chemistry, a portrait of a broken marriage where Kelly chose to expose her pain instead of hiding it. Around that time, she crossed paths with Clive Davis at an event in New York. He was now 91 years old and sitting in a wheelchair. 2 decades earlier, he had been one of the most powerful figures in her life, the man who had dismissed her music and tried to control her direction. This time, however, the dynamic had changed. Clive acknowledged that Kelly had been right from the beginning. Kelly simply smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder, as if she no longer needed his approval to believe it. It was not arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of a woman who had finally taken full control of her own life. By late 2025, Kelly had reached a point where she no longer felt responsible for satisfying anyone's expectations except her own and her children's. The moon stays. Back on the set of The Voice, the mood seemed to soften under the warm, amber lights. Blake Shelton sat facing the camera, his eyes red from the memories. He spoke slowly, as if to send a final declaration to the world. People usually call her a lucky star. But the truth is, Kelly paid for every single one of her notes in blood, tears, and sleepless nights. Over 1,000 miles away from Nashville, in a Tribeca apartment in Manhattan, Kelly stood quietly by the window. The New York City skyline sparkled below, but it was the silence in the room that she cherished most. On her finger, the tiny crescent moon ring her mother's gift from 38 years ago was still there, glowing softly as a reminder of staying true to herself. The 6-year-old girl who once stood in the doorway, clutching a small suitcase and asking in distress, "Why didn't anyone want to take me?" no longer needed anyone to lead the way. She had walked on her own 2 feet, surviving media storms, multi-million-dollar lawsuits, and heartbreak that seemed impossible to heal. Kelly Clarkson's story is no longer the journey of a pop star chasing the limelight. It is the story of a woman finding true freedom. It is the peace of realizing that inner strength holds more value than any commercial contract, and that tranquility is the highest reward for those who dare to choose themselves. Her friendship with Blake is also a testament to that freedom, a bond that transcends profits, family, or the rigid standards of the entertainment industry. Everything around Kelly has changed: her fame, her zip code, and her appearance. But one thing remains completely intact, just as her mother once told her. Even when the whole world leaves, the moon stays. Now, Kelly has found her own moon peace of mind. Because ultimately, the greatest glory isn't triumphing over adversity or anyone else. The greatest glory is daring to walk away from a life the whole world deems perfect, in exchange for absolute freedom for your own soul.